What is up, Generals? We are back with Ultimate General Civil War, and this is the J&P Rebalance Diet Legendary Union playthrough. So I apologize for the delay in uploading this. Between when I recorded this video and when I'm recording the audio for it, I built a new computer, and then I took a week long trip to help a friend move from a 3-story walk up to a 3-story walk up, just from one city to a different city. So there was quite a bit of time away from the computer in the last little bit here. And then I had to figure out how to get the recording of this battle here off of the old computer and then bring it over here so I can record audio on my new setup. New rig is a beast and is well in excess of what's required to play Ultimate General. Well, that's not the only game I play, and there were a number of games that I could not record screen capture at the same time as I was playing them because the old PC, which, has given me 4 good years of service, is just beyond where it needed to be. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is I had sort of done a trial run out to Shiloh and struggled to perform well. I was taking, I thought, higher than necessary casualties with my politics start, and I kind of wanted to stick to the whole no training thing, but there was a new version of the mod, 1.27.c or 3, something like that. I think we're on 4 now. Or no, we're on D. Anyway, it broke some things. Some weapons got rebalanced, and where they were in the rotation, the stats and the gun balance and whatnot all got rejiggered. End result is a good deal of my purchases made less sense than they had previously. So I needed to restart the campaign, basically. And I figured I'd just play till something interesting was happening, and then we'd pick back up. So that ended up being First Bull Run, because Distress Call went more or less the same. And I make some pretty significant changes to how I approach the battle, based on my previous experience now of playing out First Bull Run on Legendary last time. So as you can see, the opener for us doesn't go great. Clay's Dragoons gets a spin, or a duplication, and they just jam themselves right into the hole between 2nd New York and 2nd Ohio, and then tear 2nd U.S., a bit of a new one. However, ultimately, this ends up working out in our favor in that one of the versions of Clay's brigade here gets kind of stuck on the river. This is somewhat gamey, obviously, but so is Ghost Cavalry. And as we saw in my last attempt at this battle, there was a good deal of Ghost Cavalry action. So the bugs they giveth, but they also taketh away. In this instance, however, they giveth. So we have an opportunity here to basically pick up a free, or scoop a free cav unit and get some experience on our musketeers. I know that I've already uploaded First Bull Run with the Legendary playthrough, but this is a chance for you to see the finger quotes here, new army in action. It's been a good week and a half or more since I've played this, so this is going to be a bit of a surprise for me as well as you. But we'll figure it out as we go. So there is some Ghost Cavalry action already. So yeah, and like I said, I don't feel bad in the least for trapping them in the creek and shooting them that way. The other bit of exciting news from a channel perspective is from the date of recording, which is Sunday the 28th of March, I'll be starting a new job, and on Monday, tomorrow. So what's relevant there is I'm going to have a lot more regularity in my schedule. I'm going to be less doing the whole loan shark consultant thing and more, team player on an internal staff kind of thing. Still the same line of work, still the same overall skill set. So overall, I'm pretty happy with the direction that things are headed from that perspective. More regular work is pretty much never a bad thing, obviously. I did appreciate, as a consultant, the freedom from the 9-to-5 grind. But, that also comes with its own trade-offs, obviously. So we've dealt with the two versions of the skirmisher cav. And ultimately they got through and they caused, 70 some odd kills on an unvetted six-pounder unit. So, ultimately I'm not that worried about it. The major shift is with this army versus the one you saw in the last video is instead of picking politics at the third career step, I picked economy. That's really pretty much it. Everything else, more or less the same. The army composition, more or less the same. The army design philosophy, more or less the same. When you go with zero training, you really only have so many things you can really do in terms of changing the design philosophy around. What I noticed when I'd gone politics is I had too many men, and I still didn't have enough money to buy the guns because they were so expensive per unit that the amount of money you got from politics didn't cover down, in my opinion, and make it viable. The flip side, I'm at Econ 3, maybe Econ 4, I think just 3 at this point, and I've still got plenty of men. I'm not even a little bit worried about the bodies. And instead, those soldiers that I do have are nearly across the board more well equipped than my, peasant horde in the last video. The other big change in terms of approach is I felt that the Union Army was overbalanced on the left of the screen in my last attempt. And so as we approach this second attempt, I'm going to try and create a far more uniform distribution of soldiers. What that's going to mean is that they're going to have these troops here on the right, along with Sherman and Keyes, I think. And then my units will approach from the north and the center of the map, and then we'll get the 3 or 4 brigades that come in on the left, and they'll attack Matthews Hill on their own. Additionally, we have the Light Brigade. It's a bit different, and the big change is there's no revolvers. The revolvers, I have bought some. Where they fit in the roster of guns is a bit different, and what that's going to mean for okay, sorry about that. My cat was getting into something and just really throwing my train of thought. I could not maintain a coherent thought for anything. Something about revolvers, the availability didn't make sense. So instead of bringing a revolver unit and a long rifle unit, I'm bringing an extra cav unit. So I've got a unit of 3 or a pod of 3. And what that's cool about that is it frees the scout unit that spawns on the top right of the screen to join my troops to the south. And we get our first exciting development here, which is to say Pelham's battery is deployed way, way out of position. There's no supporting troops near it. It's in an exposed position. It doesn't really have a good deal of terrain-based cover. So basically, again, we get lucky and there's a free pickup. We've taken out 2 cav squadrons and a battery with, basically nothing to show for it from the Confederate perspective. And that's really been great for the opening of the battle, in that it just gives us that much more, that many more resources locally in places where the Confederates are now forced to really stretch themselves even more thin than they already do in the opening phase of the battle. So these troops here are all going to come in and take up, post up where I would have posted up last time, which is to say the far left of the screen. And then my dudes are going to amble across the bridge. We have a bunch of it's the same idea, right? Like there's the 3 brigades you start off the game with. They're still in pretty good shape. And then there's 3 new ones, I think, or 2 new ones. And they're all 0-star rookies. 3. So ultimately, I feel pretty good about the army coming in here. It's 6 infantry, 2 artillery, I'm pretty sure, 3 cav, 1 skirmisher, and it's a good ordnance battery and a good Napoleon battery. So 2 very good weapons relative to this battlefield from a gun perspective, and then the infantry is various shades of workable. From a battle plan perspective, the desire is to engage the Confederate Army in a more even manner than I did in the last time, and prevent that skirmish around those 2 copses of trees where we lost all those units when Stonewall shows up. Prevent that from occurring this time. The idea is hopefully to be in position with supporting artillery and rested infantry, able to receive the charges coming from Stonewall's troops, such that we can limit the efficacy of that particular attack. And I have a strong suspicion that if you can do that, the rest of the battle becomes much easier, because I personally felt like even though the last attempt at First Bull Run went pretty well, it was made immeasurably harder by the fact that we were down, I think, 2 brigades, and several of the ones that were left were A, exhausted, and B, really under strength. And so that made the latter phases of the battle much more difficult than maybe they needed to be. So the 3rd DC Light Horse is now scouting in the middle. I'm hunting for a supply wagon. There's usually supply wagons to be picked up around that portion of the battlefield, but not always. And hoping that maybe I can do what I did last time and get Confederate infantry out of position. It's not likely, but we'll see. These Allied troops are moving into position now on the left, and the idea is that they're going to try and draw the attention of the defenders around Matthews Hill while my light units pick off whatever gets exposed, and the core of my army moves into position to counter deploy. So either to flank them or to catch them in the rear, or just in general to make themselves a nuisance for the Confederates, because they're pretty lightly deployed, right? They're covering Matthews Hill, they're covering 2 or 3 of the fords, but not the one farther to the north. And at no place do they have numerical superiority, except I guess perhaps right now Matthews Hill. But to do that, they're overcommitted there and undercommitted in their center, which theoretically I'll be able to make good use of. Hampton's Legion is deploying, I think, back to Matthews Hill, mostly as a response to the fact that my cav has been spotted. And yeah, you can see the poor state of these Allied troops. In a straight up fight, they are not going to do well. But that's I never endeavor to take part in a straight up fight if I can avoid it. So, we'll try and capitalize on some of those differences. And our first artillery unit, which is a Napoleon unit, is already in position. And I'm beginning to advance with the 3rd Illinois and the 6th New York Zouaves. That is a big unit of, I believe, guys armed with muskets, probably. It's whatever gun I had a lot of that I wasn't using anywhere else. I'm pretty sure it's either muskets or rebores. And I've decided to omit the word infantry from the infantry units. Artillery will still be called First Artillery. Cavalry will get a moniker based on the type. So Dragoons and Lancers. Although I'm going to be historically, especially in the Civil War, cavalry commanders were very they played pretty fast and loose with what exactly their units were supposed to be called. So I'm going to kind of do that here too. I'm going to be like, oh, these are the cuirassiers, despite the fact that nobody wore armor in this period. Or these, yeah, okay. So actually, let's talk about this. I commit First Ohio Rifles early, and I shouldn't. I don't have 4th South Carolina bracketed at all. And I'm forced to advance with all of these troops on the other side of the river early, just to give 4th South Carolina a more important target than my 2-star veteran unit. I'm also using the scouts here to really, because I'm pretty sure if Hampton's Legion makes contact, he will eat both those brigades. Absolutely. He will absolutely do that without any compunction whatsoever. So I'm trying to sap his morale, tire him out, and then when we do make contact, I want all 3 units there at the same time. And specifically cavalry charging from the rear, the idea is to overwhelm their skill with our numbers, which is a very cold way of looking at it. So similarly, we've got Bartow's brigade charging here. I'm a lot less worried about this. A, it's a 1-star unit. B, it's been charging for a long time. And C, I've got 3 or 4 brigades in close proximity to one another, plus supporting artillery, all rested, standing, to receive the charge. I'm obviously not excited about getting charged, clearly, but I'm not nearly as worried about it as I was Hampton's Legion making contact. Then we get a huge stroke of luck. I would have preferred to capture, obviously, but they shatter. Again, just a string of some good luck on the RNG in this battle. And what happened there is what I was talking a little bit in the last video, was this preference for, once they're routed, slow chip damage versus like big thundering volleys. So none of the volleys coming from 3rd Illinois or 6th New York are likely to be hitting Hampton's Legion all that hard. But every single casualty they take when they're at 0 morale has them roll that on that table to theoretically surrender or shatter or whatever. So now I'm a lot more worried about what's going on the left, because my dudes are tired. And then with the scouts here, I think about pushing through that charge, because I'm like, oh, it's a scout unit, I'll be okay. But then I realize that there are supporting scout units near them, and also the LA Tigers are, and that's Louisiana, not Los Angeles. The Tigers are in the trenches nearby, and then that would just be disastrous for the scouts. But what we are able to do is we're able to hit 4th South Carolina from enough different sides that we can cross the river. And what I should probably be doing here with the scouts is I should have them run down 4th SC, because they are typically a 3-star unit on this battle. And so we're just kind of doing the same thing with B, right? Like, bait the charge, and they're going to come to me. And then when I make contact, because I'm going to choose when that happens, I hit them with 2, 3, 4 units all at the same time from different sides. And then I try to overwhelm, in this instance, their numbers with that multiple combatants buff/debuff situation. And just, again, overwhelm them with numbers. At this point in time, I've got 2 hours to go. I've got no intention whatsoever of pushing either one of the flags, but I am still going to be working to kill as many of the defenders here as I can, destroy units, etc., and then also get my units into position. There must be something that if I get units a certain amount of distance behind the Confederate position, it triggers the flag, because I triggered the flag, or the phase change here, which I didn't mean to. I'm not that beat up about it, because my command is mostly in position. But I obviously would have preferred to fully get into position before the phase change. It is what it is. I've got artillery in close proximity, fresh brigades crossing unopposed from the right. I'm running down a fleeing brigade on my far on my I guess it would be my right, actually, but screen left on the bottom part. I'm trying to run down B. The thing is his brigade is so big, I'm going to tire out before I can kill all of him, probably. I'm seeing if I can't run my cav through here and pick up that other battery. Every chance I get, right, to remove guns from the Confederate equation is always going to be good. So yeah, second Lancers here are picking up some kills, and they're going to run basically as soon as they get to a certain level of tired, and we'll just have to deal with B later, essentially. Yeah, like at this point in the war, my units are just very tired all the time. Like they don't have the stamina stat to fight a prolonged engagement under anything less than optimal terms. So you've really got to baby your troops. That's one of the cons of not having a higher training stat. But one of the pros, I think, is that they can be a little. I can afford to equip them better, and as the army gains experience and grows, I think that I'm going to find that I miss that training stat less and less as the campaign wears on. Obviously, every time we need to scale the army a lot, so the growing period towards Shiloh, for example, is probably going to be painful because I'm going to have a lot of new troops who I will need to find a way to get some experience on them in side battles probably before we get to Shiloh or Malvern Hill / Gaines Mill, because they're going to be responsible for taking up a large portion of the defensive efforts or the offensive efforts or something, and they might not be up to it because they'll be 0-star rookies. So I'm leaning on good equipment, and I'm leaning on the other veterans to sort of pick up the slack, so to speak. And then I'm hoping that that's enough to make up a difference. So these other two units are trying to squirt free of Matthews Hill. It looks like the Confederates are retreating from... Actually, it looks like they're moving to reinforce the stone bridge. And I'm hoping I can cause some significant damage to Bartow's 2 brigades here, and then pick up one or both of these skirmisher units. So the big one for me is the skirmishers, right? Like later on in the battle, if I don't get them here, they are going to retreat and go and defend the cannons that are defending right now Henry Hill. And if I can pick up one or both of the skirmisher units now, that makes attacking those cannons just significantly easier. And there's obviously no universe in which dramatically reducing Bartow's fighting strength is ever a bad thing. If I can get one or both of these units to shatter or surrender, so much the better. But from a overall flow, I already feel as if this battle is going better than the last attempt did. Specifically, my command is mostly in position to receive Stonewall's attack, and we've got the 2 Bartows in a really rough place, and we're crossing in force with the Allied troops on the right. We're advancing in force with the Allied troops on the left, who are, in fairness, exhausted, who are going to need to be rested, but they have 6th Zouaves and 3rd Illinois acting as a bulwark that they can attack against. And so 6th Zouaves and 3rd Illinois are probably the hammer, because they're the ones that can move. They're tired and warmed up and not exhausted. And the other Allied brigades are my anvil, who are just straight up worn out, but they're massive, and they can attack from enough different angles and whatnot. There's some artillery support, but it's not really in position yet. It's only the Ords and the Ords and the Napoleon unit pushing up the center. That's really in position and ready to go. The 6-pounders aren't ready yet in either the right or the left, so that'll be unfortunate, right? We get a huge break here, and that unit that's charging my position cancels the charge, and then we can just hit them from enough different ways and sides, canister and everything else, that we cause just catastrophic damage. And then I think we can get out of there before we get hit too hard in terms of supporting fire from 4th Virginia. We're gonna catch some no matter what happens, but we end up scooping the unit, which is worth a couple of cavalrymen here and there from some desultory musket fire or rebore fire. Here we see that looks like Bartow and B are actually going to be able to squeeze out of there. And mostly the reason that that's the case is because my men are tired. And that's one of the cons, right, of this play style, is you've really got to watch stamina, and then there's this. I remember this kind of being a pucker moment for me. I was like, oh shit. So 5th Virginia is charging 3rd Illinois, center of the screen, and I didn't have any visibility to him up until he was danger close, and I have very few support assets in the area that can assist, and everything that is there is tired. So he's very likely to make contact, and if he doesn't, it's going to be firing point blank in the woods with 2 0-star units, or 1 1-star unit and 1 0-star unit, and then a 3-star unit. It doesn't matter really what his perks are. It's going to have, hundreds in every stat or whatever, and all this crazy stuff. So I'm very, very nervous about 5th Virginia because they could punch a big hole in my line. And I'm moving up with 1st Dragoons to charge them in the woods, which is, again, a thing I say to never do. And I did it in the last video, and I'm doing it here. So, never do unless you really have no other option, apparently. Fortunately, we hit 5th Virginia from enough sides that we can kind of minimize the damage, I think, to a pretty reasonable degree. However, while I'm focusing on that, 27th Virginia manages to make contact with 1st and 2nd Ohio, supported by 4th Virginia. Like, Stonewall's brigade's always going to be a problem. So it's treated as a division here, but it's a brigade. It was historically. And it's treated as a division because this game kind of makes a very squicky, confusing distinction between brigades and regiments, but okay, whatever. We've already had that conversation. Ultimately, though things are far from perfect, I still feel as if the line's doing an okay job stabilizing. We're very clearly in a precarious moment. At no point right now do I feel as if the line is stable anywhere. In fact, I think it's the most dangerous for me on the wings, which makes sense because that's where my troops are not. All of my troops are in the center, and funnily enough, I'm not really being attacked in the center. It's almost like the AI kind of tries to determine where you are weak. It's funny how that works, right? So I'm trying to stabilize my flanks, which is mostly going okay, but it's expensive, and I'm glad that these are allied troops that I'm not worried about protecting from a long-term perspective, because we're going to have to be engaging in melee with Stonewall's units, who basically are all 3-star units. It's not a good time. It's not a good time to be fighting at the bayonet range. I'm trying to use my cavalry as a sort of as a fire brigade, so they're being utilized in a manner not terribly dissimilar from like Panzer Grenadiers back in the day. Is they're the safety valve. When things get real bad, they're going to be the one that shows up, hopefully at the right minute, and slows things down. B, despite having routed earlier, has found his compuncture and is coming in to attack the exhausted 6th New York Zouaves. So thanks to the cavalry, they're not completely overwhelmed, because they probably would have been otherwise. And slowly but surely, the battle of the 0-star units is starting to solidify. That's something that I'm starting to kind of pick up, is just everything happens slower. All of it, right? The whole process is just slower, partially because they're always tired, so you've got to watch for their stamina, but also partially because they're not as offensively lethal. They don't have the high firearm stat, right, to be super duper accurate or dangerous with their firearms. So you get good positions, and you get good volleys, and you get good melees, and you're just not able to turn those into lethal lethal blows when maybe they would be with a more experienced army. But I get more pretty toys earlier, and especially now that I've got economy at 3 pips, I might be able to, use those toys to buy enough high-end firearms that I can go into Shiloh with whatever captured stuff I've got, covering down on my crap troops, and then my good stuff can be using, my good units can be using the good stuff, and maybe they can be punching above their weight class as a result. I don't know. I got to be honest. I'm still worried about Shiloh. Every decision you make in the early campaign has got to be all about how do we get past Shiloh, and that's the only metric that matters. If you make it past Shiloh, you're doing okay. So anyway, yeah. So what you see is what you get at the moment, right? We're trying to solidify our front line. We're trying to identify where the Confederate flank is, so I can crush it if I need to, or I'm trying to engage. If I do have to engage in a prolonged firefight, I want to do so on terms that are as advantageous to me as possible, without causing a hole in my line. So I don't like, for example, that 5th Michigan is taking so much fire when they're out in the open. But I also would be remiss to leave a big gap in my line. I hate, additionally, that 4th South Carolina is just still in that trench, just banging away. And they're probably getting a pretty good kill-death ratio, so they're not likely to leave anytime soon. The only silver lining is that as a result of that, it's very likely they're not going to be able to move into position to take the farmhouse until later, so that whomever I do have to eventually kick out of the farmhouse near Henry Hill is maybe not a 3-star unit perked for range. So, little favors, I suppose. But we're doing a great job, I think, of whittling down the Confederate Army and specifically leaving each component, because the Confederate Army basically shows up in 3 stages, 4. I want to whittle each component, 3, combat ineffective, to the point that all I'm really fighting is the new stuff and then the stragglers from the old stuff. The example here is we've taken care of the cavalry from the first wave, the artillery from the first wave. We're just about to take care of B and Bartow. We already got Hampton's Legion. So there's really not much left, on the left anyway, screen left, of the Confederate first wave. There's still 4 South Carolina, and I'm pretty sure the LA Tigers are hovering around here somewhere. So you've got to watch out for those units. But there's very little of that Confederate first wave still on the field. And when I'm done with this stage, I want, similarly, very little of Stonewall's command to be on the field, so that when Johnston gets here in the later part of today, all I'm fighting is whatever Johnston brings with him on those trains. And if we can kind of use that plan, we can defeat in detail a force which is probably better situated in terms of where it is on the map, and obviously a better trained force, because we don't have any 3-star units at all. But we vastly outnumber them, especially because we're pretty aggressively making sure to kill every constituent element as we come across it, as best we can, such that the dream is that we continue to remove from the equation whole brigades again and again, so that the Confederates are forced to cover more and more territory with less and less, or fewer and fewer units. So ideally they would, in a real fight, they would break up these regiments into company-sized elements, and then you could sort of engage and destroy individual companies or platoons or squads or whatever. And this game doesn't have that level of granularity, but it just means that the screen real estate that they have to defend hasn't ever really shrunk meaningfully. But the number of units they have to do it with has and continues to do so the longer we fight. Mine, there's the same number of units fighting over a smaller and smaller and smaller portion of the map. So from a force concentration perspective, this really does work out very well in the Union's favor. And we're using terrain as best as we can here to ensure that even though they have an experience advantage on us, they're not really able to initiate these attacks in ways that they're likely to be able to follow through on them. In every instance, they're attacking uphill into the open. In the majority of cases, they are doing so against units that are in cover. Well, I guess they're not really. Like they're still choosing to attack the places where I'm weakest, which is smart. But it's even better for me because these are units that I want them to live because I want their guns, but I don't really care ultimately if my allied brigades, get beaten up to hell and back or something. So actually I've used this in the screen here. One of the big new changes with the most recent version of the mod, and one of the reasons I restarted versus staying on whatever version I was on before, is the balance changes. I want this to be, I want this game experience to be relevant or similar to what you, the player, is likely to see if you're using a release candidate anywhere near what this was recorded under. But I also love the command groups. So this is a feature that I don't know why it wasn't in the base game. Panda and I have theorized that it's quite possible that this was a user story on their Kanban board, and then, crunch occurs and things get cut because things just get cut. You just don't have as much time as you thought you did, and some things take longer than you hoped they would, and here you are. So anyway, Panda found a way to do it, I guess, in the code, and that's great. What it means is I can select a grouping of units, hit Control 1 through 9, and then whenever I come back later and hit that same number, I'll be able to select those units again. And this is a function that's been in strategy games since I started playing them with Command and Conquer, so I know it's not really a new thing, obviously, but it's not it's new to Ultimate General, and goodness, do I love it. I can put all of my rifled guns in one command group and all of my smoothbore guns in another command group, and so if one unit type is better situated to one fight and then another unit type is better situated to do a different fight, I don't need to individually select each battery anymore. I might even, depending on the size of the battles, I have always kind of liked the role play of keeping divisions together. So I might do that too. I might be like, all right, this division, I'll make them command group 1, and then this division command group 2 or whatever, and keep all those troops together, et cetera, et cetera. I think for right now, I'm just going to keep it to the batteries, which I'll be using every single battle because that feature is fantastic. But if I could, on the smaller side battles or whatever, I could be like, all right, 1st Corps, 1st Division, Command Group 1, 1st Corps, 2nd Division, Command Group 2, et cetera, et cetera. That would still allow me to keep the troops relatively close together. I always like to keep divisions fairly close together when I remember to do it, which is admittedly not always, because partially this play series is at least a little bit role play-y. It is more about doing things in a plausible fashion rather than doing things exactly as they were done. I'm not going to make each of my brigades 1,025 men, for example, and then have them be regiments. Little things like that. Regiments were rarely more than 600, I think, by the time they got to the front. You got that many laggards and fallouts and deserters and everything else. disease, all that shit. So, yeah. Well, this game doesn't model any of those things. It should. It can't. It's beyond the scope of what this game is trying to measure. I think probably in that case, you're better off with the other one that came out a little bit ago. It's like the whole war. They partnered with Lionworks to do a bunch of video content. I don't know what that game's called, but War of Rights, maybe? That's the first-person shooter. Anyway, there's other games that are more inclined to handle things like dysentery and feeding your soldiers and that kind of thing. This game just assumes you can keep them fed all the time, which is it's a better war if you could, because that's a terrible way to go. Yeah, so we're beginning to advance. As you can see, Confederate resistance is all but crumbled. My men are fine. The army as a whole is ultimately probably okay too. Like, some units are absolutely mauled, no question about it, and everybody's tired. So I'm inclined really to use every single minute of the 3 hours that I currently have to capture Henry Hill before I lose the game or the match, and in Legendary probably the game, due to you have to capture Henry before the last phase of the battle or you lose, and then you have to hold it through the last phase of the battle, or at least probably when it ends. Yeah, as you can see, Confederate resistance is crumbling, and that's great. And I'm being careful not to advance too aggressively. I still want to get those batteries that are hanging out by the thin copse of trees. You guys remember from the last video. And I want to engage whomever is in the farmhouse. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to make the mistake I made last battle, or last attempt at this battle, and push my army too fast, or too far too fast. They are already exhausted. So we take a little bit of a tick here, I think, to just chill out, to secure our position, and then to rest. We already are shooting at someone in the farmhouse, so we're going to use the fact that we're in the woods and they're in a farmhouse to try and just get shots off on them. I realize, however, 4th Federals are armed with Springfield 42s, so they can't reach. So I back them up, and I get Franklin up there because I need someone to be a bullet sponge for whoever's in that farmhouse. And I'm trying to get eyes on them, which I kind of can't. But also, I think more importantly, what I'm doing is I'm resting the army. It is various degrees of exhausted, although it is starting to come back now. A good number of these units have had a chance to just chill out, so we're doing better from that perspective. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm going to work on trying to push across the river and just remove good terrain from the Confederates. I want them to feel boxed in, like they only have one corner that they can fight in, so I know where they are. And we've got them pretty well boxed at this juncture, really. Like, there's not anywhere good for them to go, except for, those trees in the middle, essentially. We're advancing on the artillery. That'll be fun. But unlike before, where I did it with cavalry, I'm doing it now with line infantry and cavalry. We're coming in with a much heavier push on the cannons. I'm not going to try and just get cheeky about it. I'm going to come in there and I'm going to push. It's a concerted offensive. We're coming in there with a real effort of troops to try and take it, and then we're also advancing and trying to take these copses of trees around Henry's farm, or Henry's Hill, such that when Johnston's troops do arrive, we're going to be in position to receive their charge and attack and blunt it before it connects. We start getting an eye on what exactly we're looking at. It's 2 brigades, 3 batteries, and I am nearly certain there's 1 skirmisher unit in there too that we just can't see right now. That is a memory that I have. So, yeah, that'll be fun to get them out of there, but we'll figure that out. I'm confident the infantry can handle it when supported by infantry from the other side and or artillery from cavalry from the south. Yeah, so we're turning the attack on the artillery into a genuine, honest-to-God attack. I want to completely destroy everything else around the flag before I attack the flag itself. I have 2 hours to fight. There's absolutely no good reason for me to aggressively push on that flag before I've destroyed everything else on the map, because again, I want it to be that when Johnson gets here, like historically, I want it to be that Johnson would be like, all right, well, let's just go home. Let's live again to fight another day, right? Historically, I think if Johnson got off those trains and the Union already controlled Henry Hill, and Stonewall and his troops were streaming off the field, wounded and in disarray, I think Johnson would be like, let's just get right back on the train, boys, and find the next strategic crossing or junction to defend on the way, presumably to Richmond. But he's hard-coded here to attack, even though it will be Johnston's command versus an entire army. And one of the things that's working out really well for me is that as I approach the artillery and the skirmishers and everything with basically a division, I am also approaching with my allied troops, and they turn to face them. The artillery does, and also so does B. And so their defensive forces are being split across both attacks, and they're wasting fire on units in a tree line. Not wasting, but they're sending less effective fire on units in a tree line when they probably should be directing them to, the units in a cornfield immediately in front of them. But they're not, because, they're going to target the nearest thing. And the nearest thing is 2nd New York, it seems like. So we're wiping out batteries. We're trying to wipe out skirmisher units, because those are the things, to be honest with you, those are the things I am more worried about than anything. I've got the Allied scout unit of cavalry trying to run down Stewart, because more than anything, I really just want him away from what I'm trying to do right now. I'm more worried about that than anything else. And yeah, overall, I'm ecstatic with how this attack ultimately progresses. I remember this being one of those things that came out even better than I'd initially hoped it would go. And now I'm moving troops into position to ultimately try and take Henry Hill and transition the phase. But before I do that, I want to take out the last of the artillery, and then I'm going to consider killing the skirmishers is gravy. Killing B is icing on the cake. But the number one objective here is the artillery, and I think we end up getting all of it, which again makes the last phase of this battle very, very easy. So this is a good example of defeat in detail, and how much less the AI can do when it has just that many fewer units to make decisions with. In an earlier video, I was saying, oh man, being a light infantryman in my command would be a real bear. I think being a cavalryman in my command would be even worse. The cavalry takes more losses on a proportional basis, I think, than anybody. In terms of obviously absolute raw numbers, the infantry takes higher losses, but from a percentage standpoint, percentage of unit strength standpoint, I feel as if the cavalry gets hit harder. I'm pushing on the LA Tigers here from a couple of different sides, mostly with allied units. I want to evict them from the farmhouse. Capture all the supply wagons. Yeah, like I said, I think it's going really well at this phase of the battle. Mostly I'm trying to minimize pointless casualties from B. Trying to get him confused and spinning for no reason and see if I can't pick him up. I want to put fire on those skirmisher units, and then still got 2 hours to transition the phase. So I want my units to be in position, ready to receive Johnston's troops, and I want them to be rested when that occurs. And more than anything, I want to kill these damn skirmishers. who are being whittled down pretty heavily. They were at 500 man per unit, I think, earlier, and now they're, I don't know, 150, 200, somewhere in there. So it's going okay from that perspective too. Yeah, like I think let's take a look at the battle in a macro sense thus far, because not for nothing, I think the tail end of the video is going to be cleanup. Overall, I think approaching from the north like that really gives you an opportunity to get in position way earlier and to take the Confederate Army apart in pieces. And yeah, you're always going to be hard fought. There's no version of this battle where you're not fighting tooth and nail the entire time. But there's a way to approach this fight that feels pretty manageable. I imagine this is not the cleanest, perfect attempt at this fight, but it's probably pretty close. In terms of timing, in terms of loss rates are not awful, and we wipe almost entirely the Confederate command at each phase before transitioning to the next, which I felt immensely helped our purposes for reducing the impact of Johnston's arrival, because Johnston does bring a pretty healthy number of soldiers when he arrives. And yeah. Okay, so I know like middle of the video is kind of a weird time to talk about like next steps or whatever. It's going to be a week probably before I release anything new, right? I've got a new job. I've got to figure out what my week looks like. So from both a internal to the job context of, hey, these are certain days, I'm almost certainly going to have deliverables and stand-up meetings and all that kind of crap. And at the present, I just don't know when those things occur. I don't know when we do what kinds of meetings, right? So I think I'm going to focus on that and get a better idea of when we meet, about what, and what do I need to do to get ready for those meetings. And then I also need to figure out how keeping up with work affects me, because I've been a consultant for a long time. I have not been a regular 9 to 5, guy for a minute, for a hot minute. So that's going to be something new to figure out. Doesn't mean it's something I can't figure out. It just means it's something I got to figure out. And pro and con about that is, the con is I'm no longer as in control of my schedule as I have gotten used to over the last several years. The pro about that is when I clock out of work, which is something I've never done as a consultant, you don't get to do that, right? You don't clock out of work. You're not done. You have, when the project's finished, for months, you're still working on invoicing and support. So you're still plugged into the client. You might not be on their site or on their Zoom meetings anymore, but you're still doing stuff. And I've worked, routinely from like 10 in the morning till 2 at night, or 2 in the morning. And the difference is that it's not, an 8-hour stretch. It's 2 hours here, 3 hours there, in the middle of going to the grocery or trying to hit the gym, so that I don't have too many negative long-term health consequences from the fact that I'm glued to a chair in Zoom meetings or doing analysis of one kind or another. So all of that is going to be a huge reshuffling in terms of how basically my entire life operates. The pro is that once I figure out what that kind of weekly cadence looks like, this is a level of regularity in my daily schedule that I haven't had since I was in the Army, or will theoretically once I, get started. There'll be that kind of regularity. Like, I imagine no version of corporate America is truly like the Army, but in that regard, I never had to think about once I figured out what my daily or weekly cadence was like, I never had to worry about it. I always knew, hey, in 2 weeks we're going to have this, and in 3 weeks we're going to have that, and every Tuesday we do this, and every Thursday we do that, and yada, 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 right? And every other Friday we have these things, and I just knew my week way before the actual week itself. I had a good idea of what was going to be happening in that week, and then there would be little things here and there that might be a surprise, but that'd be about it. So ultimately, I think I'm pretty excited about all this from that standpoint. I'm gonna miss setting my own clock. Marching to the beat of my own drum. I'm gonna miss being like, hey, I was up till 2 working with clients in the Far East. I can't take meetings before 10 today or whatever, because I'm just by nature a night owl. I've never been a morning person, even in the military. And I think that there was certainly a level of resistance on my part to accepting a job, a traditional full-time job, because it would almost certainly involve, adjusting to that 9 to 5 timetable. But regularity and benefits, and to say nothing of career advancement, all kind of overwhelmed my desire to sleep in as viable reasons for me to accept or not accept a position when it was offered. In the battle, essentially what I suggested would occur is basically occurring. It's Johnston's command plus a severely depleted LA Tigers trying to overwhelm an entire Union army that is now collapsed on a very small portion of the map, in pretty good defensive terrain, saying, yeah, brah, come and get me. They are having, I think, the most success on the far right of the Union line. This is left and up of the screen for the viewer. So this is where Smith's brigade was pushing. They have great angles to approach from that position, and I don't have a good deal of artillery over there, because typically when I've played this battle, they attack very heavily or very aggressively on the Union left, screen right. And so I deploy, and I talked about this in the last video, I deploy in a way that there's no way for them to approach that position, which is the rightmost copse of trees. There's no way for them to approach that position without me seeing it, without me knowing it's coming long before it gets here, and without me being able to put supporting fires from other weird angles onto it. In this instance, I think maybe they saw that coming, and they've begun to attack more aggressively in the middle. One of the reasons I deploy like I do on the with so much of my force weighted on the Union left like that, where Pennsylvania long rifles, the 1st Ohio rifles, etc. are, is if they do attack as heavily as they are in the middle, I can then just use those forces to attack the thin tree line, try and take it, and then push this battle into a smaller segment of the map. I am again and again and again trying to reduce for them the viable angles of attack, and trying to push them into places where they don't want to be fighting, and where I do want to be fighting, with the additional caveat that they have to, because they have to take this flag from me, and then hold it for a certain period of time. This is working out great. Cook comes in here along with Holmes and someone else, the Tigers. And I'm surprised that Holmes doesn't push the charge all the way through. I'm genuinely shocked about that. Because Cock gets just smashed, right? He gets so much flank fire that, even at 2,400 men, he can't push the attack through. I'm surprised that Holmes, who was able to approach almost unmolested, doesn't try and push that attack forward. But through all of this, I'm reminded that the Confederates don't have any artillery, none, not one single cannon. So one of the things about the last attempt at this battle that went rough was the fact that I was getting shelled the entire time. This whole defense, I was being shelled, and I couldn't really go forward to attack anything because they kept on getting reinforcements, right, from Stonewall or Johnston. And I could never go on the offensive. So I was just getting shelled for free, essentially. And, it was 6-pounders or 12-pound howitzers at extreme range. It wasn't awful. But every time those attacks land, there's a chance, however small, but there's still a chance they might kill a colonel. They might kill a major. They might whatever. And those casualties add up, and they're painful. And they attack the efficiency of a unit. They attack the morale of a unit, I think. Even with the replacement officer, which significantly reduces the impact from a viability of the attempt perspective, because I thought it was silly that you could get, your commanding officer wounded and then your unit was effectively useless for the rest of the fight. Little things like that. Just that little pesky fire from artillery adds up, is all I'm getting at, especially in your smaller units like artillery or cavalry. Yeah. All right. So the fight here is not going great for the Zouaves. But the flip side is the Zouaves are attracting all the attention, which is sort of the point. Not specifically of Zouave units, but when I make a rookie unit like this, where they're huge in comparison to the rest of the army, my intention is basically, let's say that right now my average brigade size I'm shooting for is about 1,800. That's kind of what I'm targeting. And that's basically determined entirely by which guns can I afford and how many of them can I afford. That's really basically it. So I'm targeting a brigade size of around 1,800, plus or minus, let's say 200. So I think 15 to 18 is the range I want to try and target. When I make a brand new unit, I'll probably try and make them double that. So let's say 3,000, 2,500 to 3,000, somewhere in there. And the idea is that I will barely replace any casualties at all while that brigade gets experience. And when they go from 2,500 over the course of a couple of battles and get whittled down to 1,500, what's left will be hardened veterans, theoretically speaking. Now, I'll always pump these units up a little bit so that I can kind of have a round number. So looking at the screen right now, I see, for example, the Pennsylvania Long Rifles has 528 men. I would, assuming they don't take any casualties in the rest of the battle, which they've already taken some in the course of this sentence, I would pump them back up to 530 or 550 and leave them at that point, right? The sweet spot vis-a-vis skirmisher units for me is probably 400, 375, somewhere in there. Now, for a long time, that number was dictated by by what was at one juncture the cap on these units. They could only ever be, I think, 375 men. And now they can be up to 750 or 1,000 or something, like some big number. But I still tend to play around vanilla sizes. I still tend to play with brigades around, let's say, 2,000. And batteries of around 12 guns. And I think the reason I do that is I know you can go up to 6,000 men in a brigade, but the maps aren't designed for units that large to function. And so a lot of the terrain features, they feel pretty good to use when you've got brigades that are, 1,800 men in size. Because like the size of a brigade is physically larger when there's more men in it. I mean, obviously, right? I don't know the algorithm. I don't know the rules. I don't know if there's like a minimum and a maximum frontage or whatever for these brigades, but they're bigger when there's more dudes in them, obviously. And the relevant portion here then is that I feel when I'm playing these battles that a 3,000 man brigade is clunky. You got to be really careful where you put the damn thing. It doesn't always work in terms of fitting into certain terrain features. Like it's just not a good fit, I don't think, all the time. But a 2,000 man brigade or a 1,500 man brigade, these maps were designed with units of that size in mind. And the game scales to you for the most part. So if I have an army composed of 3,000 man, if I have an army composed of, let's say, an 1,800 man brigade, right? Then the Confederates will typically have double that ish for their brigades. So I'll be typically facing brigades of around 3,000 men, plus or minus 400 or 500. And that feels pretty doable. I mean, obviously, if I had 3,000 man brigades, they'd be up to $6,000 or whatever. So, I mean, there is an upper limit. Like, I guess there's that. If I had 6,000 man brigades, I think the AI would also only have 6,000 man brigades, and that would mean that I'm fighting 1-to-1 versus 2-to-1. So there's certainly something to be said for that. But flip side, I can't currently equip that many men and keep an army of any real size. So one of the big limiters, I think, of the big brigade mantra, even though Napoleon once said, God marches with the big brigades, or the side with the big brigades, or something loosely to that effect, is not manpower. Although when we get to the camp screen, we'll see. Well, okay, no, that's actually a bad. After first bull run is a bad time to really gauge how many men you have, because I think they give you a lot because they know you're building to Shiloh and you need to grow a big army between now and Shiloh. But like I think I have 7,000 in the bank before this battle starts. And actually, let's talk about game plan from that perspective, because you get the idea. My brigade size is my brigade size because of the map and because of how many guns I can buy and all that shit. All right, fine. There's not a whole lot more to it than that. I don't want to belabor the point. With Shiloh, in the Union, you can bring 2 corps. I am planning on bringing 2 corps. Instead of putting a lot of points into Army Org in order to bring 1 big corps, I think it's probably okay to have 2 corps with 18 brigades in them at whatever my current AO is, or maybe 1 more pip of it. And I think I would very much like to have a few more pips instead in medicine, or more likely logistics, or econ or something. I would like instead to build a better army and just have more corps than worry about having a bigger army and fewer corps under my under General Fiasco. This to me feels like a very Union thing to do. My understanding is that historically the Army of the Potomac had quite a few more corps in it, but that they were smaller than an equivalent Confederate formation. And the Confederate there was only ever, I think, 3 corps in the Confederate. That sounds right, actually. There were 3 corps, but they were bigger. I mean, Confederate brigades were bigger in general, I think. And maybe not just 3. They might have had more than 3 corps, but they didn't have 12 corps or what. I mean, like by the end of the war, there were a lot of Union corps in the field. So I feel like that's a pretty Union-y thing to do, is to go into Shiloh with like 2 corps versus 1 big corps. And I got to figure out what my breakpoints are. I know right now I can bring a maximum of 18 units, and I'm trying to decide if that's enough. If 36 brigades will be enough on the proviso across 2 corps that they'll probably then be either larger or more well equipped than if I was to bring more brigades. So quite a few fewer casualties. I think we took a little over 10,000 last time, so 7,000 here. I imagine statistically fairly few of them on my units, so a good deal on the Allies. Bunch of promotions, a pretty uninspiring amount of captures here. We pick up the rebore musket, which is always a good thing, and then $30,000 in supply wagon, which is also not going to hurt. The best thing for me from a gameplay perspective is damn near everything that can pick up a star picks up a star. Even the 1st Napoleon, or 1st Artillery Unit, Napoleons, they pick up their 2nd star. I don't remember how much camp stuff I do here in the recording. Probably not a lot. So they're going to have good weapons going forward, and I think rookie troops or medium star troops. So worried about their guns, but that hopefully means we're not going to be capturing just like muskets and stuff going forward. Thank goodness. Oh, we did this again. I've got to figure out what I'm doing wrong on the cut I make in the film. So I play these at 200% speed, and then just before the battle when I'm going through the camp screen and showing where things are, and then just after the battle when I'm going through the camp screen and showing where things landed, I go back to 1x speed. And I think I make a nice cut in the film so that I can kind of take a look at that, but it looks like I don't. It looks like I'm doing that wrong somehow, in that we've already seen this footage and here we are seeing it again. So that'll be interesting to figure out. I'll play with it from a technical perspective. Anybody who watches the channel, I use DaVinci Resolve. I'm very happy with it, especially considering it's free. I don't play on a Mac, so I can't use GarageBand. My girlfriend uses a Mac, and she uses GarageBand and says I should get one for that purpose, and I'm not terribly inclined to buy a computer just to video edit for my fun hobby, but whatever. Yeah, so we're taking a look at the reputation. I've got 17,000 bodies to spend and $233,000 to do it with. Got 3 pips in economy, which to me is very good. I'm going to basically be buying every gun I can get my hands on. They got a big bump to their armory score, which is good because they had crap. They had 6-pounders and muskets the entire time. So I'm happy to start seeing them get Lafayette's, or not Lafayette's, what the hell's Lorenz's, or 55s or something with 400 range. I don't know. And then do I pick a perk point? Looks like I don't. All right. Let's the second attempt at the fast first battle of Bull Run. I'm going to pick this campaign up at the camp screen, and we're going to talk about building the army for Shiloh before I do a video on river crossing. Until then, though, excited to be back. Happy with the new setup for recording purposes, and then I can't wait to see you guys the next one. This is Fiasco signing out, saying you guys have a great couple of days. I'll see you probably in about a week on the field.